Life frequently unveils surprises through unforeseen occurrences. At 74, I thought I had experienced it all. Love, loss, joy, and grief. I felt I was settled into the serene, predictable rhythm of my later years. My days unfolded in the tranquil embrace of my rural home, enveloped by art, the soothing melodies of my record player, and the soft chorus of birdsong. I had convinced myself of my contentment, believing I needed nothing more from life. Then came Matthew, my nephew, the child of my younger sister, who arrived at my doorstep when his world crumbled in ways I knew all too well. A marriage unraveling, a career stalled. He stood there with a duffel bag, a weary smile, and a look of disappointment in his eyes. Without a moment's thought, I welcomed him in. Ultimately, I found myself with the room, and there wasn't much else happening around me. Initially, his presence brought a sense of solace, infusing my tranquil home with a vitality I hadn't realized was absent. We shared meals, engaged in lengthy conversations, and forged a genuine bond. He mirrored a part of myself I believed had faded away. Radiant, inquisitive, and endlessly optimistic. Then something shifted. It began with a gaze that held on just a moment longer than usual, and a touch that hung in the air for just a heartbeat too long. At first, I persuaded myself that I was just dreaming. He was, after all, my nephew, young enough to be my son, grappling with his struggles and vulnerabilities, looking to me for guidance. There seemed to be no reason to think otherwise. However, late one night, as I sat alone in my studio with a glass of wine, I heard footsteps outside the door. Olivia, his voice wavered, soft and uncertain, as though he questioned his presence in that moment. "Come in," I said, setting my drink aside and turning to face him. He stepped inside, his face illuminated by the warm glow of the desk lamp. There was something in his eyes that I couldn't quite identify, something that sent shivers down my spine and made my heart race in a way I hadn't experienced in years. "May we have a conversation?" he asked in a voice barely above a whisper, and with that, the course of my life shifted. This narrative explores the nature of choices, the limits we impose on ourselves, and the consequences that arise when we push beyond those boundaries. It delves into the depths of solitude, yearning, and the rapid unraveling of our lives when we lower our defenses. If you are open to it, I will share all, the reality of that night and the subsequent nights that followed. Let me share the beginning of it all and the unraveling that followed. Living alone was something I never saw coming. Daniel, my partner for more than 40 years, was meant to share this home with me as we aged together. It was our dream, a charming yet modest cottage nestled in the countryside, embraced by rolling hills and vibrant gardens. When he passed away a decade ago, everything shifted. I withdrew into my inner world. Painting offers solace, much like the comfort of a daily routine. Each day unfolded with the familiar ritual of morning coffee, a stroll through the garden, and an hour dedicated to my studio, anchoring me in a world that felt increasingly disordered. Landscapes, still lifes, and portraits emerged from my brush with the careful attention of someone striving to find clarity in chaos, accompanied by friends and my sister Karen, who would come to visit from time to time. She would settle at my kitchen table, tea in hand, sharing stories about her son Matt. "He's clever," she'd remark, her eyes sparkling with pride. "But he is lost, Olivia. He just hasn't discovered where he belongs." Matthew remained a distant figure in my life, someone I would see at family gatherings or hear about through Karen's tales. As a child, he was curious and engaged, frequently posing questions and jotting down stories in a worn notebook. In adulthood, he achieved success as an author, publishing 3 books by the time he turned 30. Yet his personal life was rather unstable. One day, Karen reached out to me. Her voice trembled with worry. "Matthew isn't doing well," she asserted. "The marriage has concluded, and he is struggling to regain his composure. He yearns for a shift in his surroundings, a tranquil place to find clarity for his thoughts." I had wished for him to stay with you for an extended period. I took a moment to stop. I wanted to help, but I found myself uncertain about how to share my space with someone after all these years. Isolated, yet Karen's voice conveyed a sense of urgency. I simply couldn't bring myself to say no, naturally. I informed her that he is welcome here. When Matthew arrived, I noticed the transformation in him. The confident, outgoing young man I remembered was no longer present. Instead, he seemed quieter and more introverted, appearing exhausted with stooped shoulders and darkened eyes. He carried only a single duffel bag, leaving the rest of his belongings behind in the city. "Greetings, Aunt Olivia," he remarked. With a tentative smile, I pulled Matthew into a warm embrace. "It's wonderful to see you." His room was prepared, a delightful sanctuary with a view of the garden I possessed. I adorned it with vibrant blooms and a collection of books that I believed would pique his interest. He seemed genuinely touched by the gesture. His gratitude was sincere, evoking a mix of appreciation and sympathy within me. Initially, we kept our distance. He often retreated to his room, absorbed in his laptop or gazing out the window. I respected his space, unsure how to bridge the gap given his clear distress. Yet, as days turned into weeks, a routine began to form. I cooked, and he would join me in the kitchen for supper, offering to help with chopping vegetables or setting the table. We would share meals in comfortable silence, discussing trivial matters like the weather or the latest book he was engrossed in, and gradually he started to reveal more of himself. It seemed as though he had lost everything. He confessed one night, his voice heavy with despair. "Both my marriage and my job have grown more resilient." I extended my hand across the table to rest it gently on his. "You have not been defeated. Matthew, you are surrounded by love. You have a family that cares for you, and your youth is a gift." Sufficient to reconstruct, he gave me a subtle, appreciative smile. "Thank you, Olivia. I can't imagine my life without you by my side." Over the span of several weeks, our bond deepened significantly. We began our morning strolls. Together, we wandered the trails that meandered around the hills behind the house. He shared stories of his childhood, his passion for crafting words, and the dreams that once filled him with hope, but now seemed distant. "Matthew, you possess a remarkable talent," I remarked during one of our hikes. You have accomplished a great deal. Keep pushing forward." He regarded me with a mix of admiration and astonishment. "It appears effortless," he remarked, "yet discovering the good is quite challenging. In yourself, when everything seems to be unraveling, I understood his pain more deeply than he realized after Daniel's passing. I experienced a similar turmoil. Adrift and overlooked, I grappled with my own uncertainties in his absence. Yet through my work, I rediscovered my footing. Eager to assist Matthew in navigating his own journey, I extended an invitation to my studio one evening. "This is where I dedicate the majority of my hours," I elaborated, gesturing towards the canvases that adorned the walls. "It's my sanctuary." He navigated the room with focused determination, examining my work, which left me in awe. "These are absolutely wonderful," he declared. His voice brimmed with genuine appreciation, and hearing him express that ignited something within me, a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," I murmured softly, "has consistently guided me in understanding the complexities of life." He nodded, his gaze intense and unwavering. I feel compelled to seek out that sensation once more. The one that brings a sense of completeness. During those moments, I noticed a transformation in him. He seemed to carry less burden and was more engaged and vibrant, as if the heaviness he bore was starting to lift. Yet, alongside this change, something else emerged, an elusive quality in his gaze, a lingering look more powerful, touched just a heartbeat longer, or the way his hand would brush against my arm in laughter, his warmth radiating against my skin. Initially, I brushed it off as mere affection, a reflection of our deepening connection. But as time went on, the emotions it stirred within me were impossible to overlook. On a warm afternoon, we found ourselves seated on the porch. As I sipped my tea and watched the sun dip below the hills, the conversation turned to Daniel, and I found myself revealing thoughts and feelings I hadn't shared with anyone since his passing. I conveyed that he was my closest friend. My voice carried a blend of sorrow and affection. We had crafted this life side by side, and his absence felt like a piece of me had been torn away. Matthew leaned in, taking my hand in his grip gentle yet firm. "You're incredible, Aunt Olivia," he said, his words resonating with warmth. "I trust that you comprehend that. Your experiences and challenges have undoubtedly forged a strength within you that surpasses your own perception." His words rendered me utterly speechless. I found myself gazing at him, captivated by something in his eyes that made my heart race. A whirlwind of adoration, desire, and an elusive emotion surged within me, prompting me to quickly withdraw my fingers. As I tried to steady myself, I expressed my gratitude to Matthew, forcing a smile. Yet the moment lingered. We shifted, conversed, and seemed to occupy the space together. The bond we had built remained, but an undercurrent of tension was palpable. I grew increasingly aware of him, of his movements, his words, and how he seemed to fill the entire room. I reassured myself it was nothing, that I was merely overanalyzing. Yet as I lay in bed at night staring at the ceiling, thoughts of him consumed me. I recalled a particular evening when we were tidying up after dinner, and he paused me in the kitchen. "May we have a conversation?" he asked. With a hesitant voice, I turned to face him, of course. He appeared to grapple with his thoughts for a moment, but ultimately found his voice. "I just wanted to express how much you truly mean to him." He shared with me how incredibly sweet and patient you've been. "I find myself uncertain about my next steps." His remarks were laden with emotion, and I could feel a knot tightening in my throat. "There's no need for gratitude, Matthew. I'm glad you're here." Yet the intensity of his gaze suggested he had more to express. "Matthew," I felt my voice falter before I could go on. He moved closer, his fingers brushing against mine, and the air between us felt thick. I was charged with something. On a calm autumn evening, I found it difficult to acknowledge that the line between us had blurred irreversibly, unnoticed, amidst the familiar regularity of habit. The day had drifted by uneventfully, with Matthew and me spending the afternoon in the garden, clearing away the last remnants of summer. The air was crisp. The air was rich with the scent of fallen leaves, while the warm light of the setting sun cast a golden glow over our surroundings as we toiled away. Matthew made his entrance. More serene than I had observed him in weeks, he laughed easily. His previous melancholy was transformed into an enchanting warmth. "You have a talent for this, Aunt Olivia," he remarked, gesturing towards the meticulously trimmed hedges and the freshly turned soil. "It's as if you've created your own little world here." I smiled and cleaned my hands with my gardening gloves. This place has served as my refuge, providing stability, especially after my thoughts wandered away, and he acknowledged it with a nod, offering no further clarification. It seems clear that after dinner each evening, he would pour us all a glass of wine, a cherished tradition we had embraced since his arrival. We sat in the living room, the fireplace crackling softly in the background, enveloping the house in a cozy warmth. Inviting and secure, it stood in stark contrast to the growing discomfort I felt within myself. It began simply enough. We discussed literature as we often did. He had been rereading one of his favorite books, The Great Gatsby. As we delved into its themes, love, ambition, and the fleeting essence of happiness, he noted with a hint of melancholy, swirling the wine in his glass. Gatsby devoted his whole existence to pursuing a dream that was forever out of reach. I nodded, contemplating my own journey and the aspirations I had relinquished throughout the years. I replied softly, "Sometimes it's simpler to cling to a notion than to confront the truth." He looked at me, his Aunt Olivia and mine. "Do you ever feel at peace?" Aunt Olivia, have you ever let go of something you truly desired? Taken aback by the question, I sipped my wine to gather my thoughts. I'm uncertain if I truly confessed in the end. There were indeed things I longed for that eluded me, yet I hold no regrets about the journey I've taken. It has been significant, he emphasized with a contemplative tone, which is a kind way of saying, I think I've been pursuing the wrong things my whole life, especially now that they are gone. I find myself uncertain about what remains. I extended my arm and rested my hand atop his. You're still in your youth, Matthew, which means you have ample opportunity to figure things out, pressed in close, and for a moment the atmosphere shifted around us. It was only later, in the solitude of my studio, that I realized just how deeply that moment had affected me. I endeavored to concentrate on the canvas. Before me lay the scene, yet my thoughts drifted back to Matthew, the intensity of his gaze lingering in my mind. The warmth of his hand resting on mine felt significant, but I reassured myself it was merely a fleeting moment of vulnerability. I sensed a presence, the sound of footsteps echoing just beyond the door. Olivia's voice came out soft and uncertain, as though she questioned his presence in that moment. Come in, I said, setting my brush aside and turning to meet his gaze. He stepped inside, his face illuminated by the gentle glow of the desk lamp. An intensity in his eyes made my heart race. Is everything okay? I inquired, trying to maintain an air of casualness. He hesitated, his gaze fell to the floor. I'm not sure, he replied. I wanted to have a conversation with you. Of course, I replied, gesturing for him to take a seat. He refrained from taking a seat. Instead, he advanced, his hands nervously shifting at his sides, and he began to speak. In a barely audible whisper, uncertain of how to convey his emotions, I find myself engulfed in a whirlwind of chaos in my life, and you are the only presence that brings any hint of stability. His words reverberated through me like a shock wave. I parted my lips to respond. Yet, just as I was about to, he had already bridged the distance separating us. Aunt Olivia's voice trembled. In that fleeting moment, he seemed utterly vulnerable, adrift in uncertainty, and I found myself unable to halt his advance. His lips grazed mine, soft and hesitant, as though he anticipated my retreat. However, I chose not to. The kiss was brief, but in that moment it seemed as if time stood still when he pulled away, his eyes brimming with a mix of fear and desire. I'm sorry, he responded quickly. I ought not to have retreated. Everything is fine. I halted, my voice stirring you awake. Amidst the turmoil, I sensed the weight of the moment. My words felt inadequate, a mere shadow of the truth. What had unfolded was unjust, leaving me grappling with confusion and a swirl of emotions. He acknowledged my sentiment, his posture betraying a deep sense of resignation. I'll go, he said, pivoting to leave. Matt, could you hold on for a moment? I was uncertain about my reasons for stopping him. Maybe it stemmed from a desire to prevent him from departing with feelings of shame and regret. Perhaps it was because a part of me did not want him to leave at all. He turned back, his face unreadable. I replied softly, You are. You are not alone in this journey. Whatever challenges you face, we can navigate them together. For a moment, he simply stared at me, weighing the truth of my words before finally nodding, a faint smile beginning to tug at the edges of his lips. He responded with a barely audible whisper of thanks. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. We did not discuss what had transpired, yet the tension between us was palpable. Every glance, every touch, and every shared moment was charged with an unspoken understanding. I became acutely aware of him, the way he moved, the way he spoke, how his presence seemed to fill the room. It felt as if the kiss had opened a door I hadn't known was there, and I found myself unable to close it. One evening, as we sat on the porch, as the sun dipped below the hills, he shattered the tranquility of the moment. Do you ever feel as if you're living someone else's life? He asked, his voice gentle yet unwavering. I gazed at him, taken aback by his question. What do you mean? Have you ever sensed that the countless sacrifices you've made have led you to a point where you hardly recognize who you are anymore? I reflected on Daniel and the life we had built, weighing the sacrifices I had endured and the dreams I had relinquished. For the first time, I permitted myself to admit that, indeed, I did. At times, I do feel that way. Yes, I finally said it. I believe. At some point, everyone experiences this feeling. He nodded, his eyes fixed intently on the horizon. I don't want to feel that way anymore, he added, the weight of his words lingering in the space between us as we lay in bed that night. I found myself unable to shake thoughts of him, the intensity of his gaze and the way his words stirred a tumult of longing and fear within me. I recognized the inappropriateness of my feelings. He was my nephew, my sister's child. Yet, in that instant, he transcended that label. He was a man, vulnerable, lost, seeking something I doubted I could provide. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of vitality coursing through me. The kiss was brief, yet its resonance lingered in every corner of my home. The memory clung to me, the warmth of his lips, the raw vulnerability in his gaze, and the way my pulse quickened against all reason. Yet now, in the stark clarity of the present, remorse envelops me like a suffocating shroud. Matthew was my nephew, and despite the shattered feelings and desperation we both experienced, we agreed that what had happened was a mistake. For several days, we kept our distance from each other. Another Matthew stayed in his room, venturing out only for coffee or a meal. I immersed myself in my painting, yet the strokes on the canvas felt aimless and disordered. My focus eluded me. My mind kept drifting back to him, to that moment, and to the unspoken tension that lingered between us like a heavy fog. On the third day, he finally shattered the silence. As I sat at the kitchen table, a mug of tea growing cold in my hands, he made his entrance. He felt uneasy, his usual self-assurance giving way to a sense of caution and uncertainty. He spoke softly, "Good morning." I spoke, trying to sound nonchalant, yet my voice betrayed me with a slight tremor, hinting at the turmoil beneath the facade. He sat opposite me, hands clasped on the table, and for a minute, silence enveloped us, neither of us breaking it. The silence between us felt almost excruciating. At last, he cleared his throat. "Aunt Olivia," I halted him the other evening by lifting my hand. "Matthew, there's no need for that. Let's talk about it. It was a mistake, a fleeting moment of confusion." He quivered at my words. "Was that all it was to you, a mere mistake?" as his jaw tightened. I looked at him in astonishment. By the pain in his words, what else could it possibly be? I couldn't tell if he recognized his gaze dropping to the table, yet it didn't strike me as an error. It felt sincere. His words surprised me, yet I managed to maintain my composure. "You're going through a difficult phase right now, Matthew. You are fragile, and I should have been more careful," he repeated, his voice rising slightly. "Do you really believe this?" "Focuses solely on vulnerability. What about my feeling of being lost? Is it not me?" I asked with a certain inflection. Rougher than I intended, he stood abruptly, scraping his chair against the floor. "You don't understand, do you?" he declared, his eyes ablaze. "You believe I don't understand my own emotions, that I'm just a broken child holding on to the first person who showed me kindness. This isn't just about that, Olivia. It's about us," I reiterated. "Surprised? Indeed you," he murmured, his tone gentle. "In a subtle way, you are truly remarkable, and you may not even be aware of it. You have crafted a remarkable existence for yourself, and your kindness and empathy towards me have truly touched my heart. Your presence ignites a spark within me." His remarks left me in awe, yet they also instilled a sense of dread within me. This was beyond our capacity to explore. It simply couldn't have been Matthew. "Your well-being matters to me." I expressed my concerns carefully, yet this situation is unacceptable. It simply isn't right. He looked at me intently, and I could feel the pain reflected in his eyes. It seems he responded in due time. I shall gather my possessions and take my leave. Matthew, it's not necessary for you to do that. Indeed, I do, he asserted with conviction that remaining here would only exacerbate our situation. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the heaviness of his words pressing down on me. A part of me yearned to intervene and urge him to stay. We could navigate this together, yet a different part of me recognized he was right. The following morning, he had vanished. The house felt unsettlingly vacant without him. For weeks, I wandered from room to room, unable to shatter the silence that echoed in his absence. I sought refuge in my work. Yet every canvas I started lay forsaken, a chaotic mix of colors and lines that went nowhere. I tried to distract myself with chores, books, and visits to friends, but nothing seemed to ease the emptiness. He is deeply missed. One afternoon, while I was tending to the garden and pulling out weeds, my phone chimed with a message from Karen. Matthew is staying with a friend in the city. He mentioned that he required some time to get himself sorted out. I appreciate your kindness in looking after him, Olivia. It's hard to imagine how he would have managed without your support. I caught a glimpse of the message, my heart heavy with longing for Karen to grasp the truth. As the weeks turned into months, a delicate sense of normalcy started to take shape within me. I went back to my painting. However, my prose had adopted a deeper, more introspective quality. My friends noticed the change in me, yet they remained silent, sensing that I wasn't prepared to talk about it. Then one day I received a letter. The envelope was unadorned, lacking a return address, yet the calligraphy on the front unmistakably belonged to Matthew. I took a moment before unfolding it in my hands, trembling just a bit. Dear Olivia, I trust you are doing well. I've considered reaching out to you numerous times, but I always struggled to find the right words. Even now, I question whether this is the right course of action, but there are thoughts I need to express, and I hope you can grasp my intentions. First and foremost, I want to sincerely apologize for putting you in such a difficult position and for complicating matters. I recognize that I overstepped a boundary, and that is something I will carry with me forever. However, I want you to understand that my words that evening were genuine. Your steadfast support, strength, and comfort have been invaluable during my overwhelming moments. You've helped me remember the person I aspire to be, and I will forever be grateful for the decision to seek therapy in order to untangle the chaos I've created in my life. It can be quite challenging, yet this marks the start. I've recently resumed writing after a prolonged break. The expressions appear to stem from a genuine source rather than from a need to dazzle or please anyone else. I find myself uncertain. While the future remains uncertain, I trust that we will each discover our own path to tranquility. Olivia, you are worthy of joy. Always keep that in mind. Thank you for everything, Matthew. I read the letter once more, tears streaming down my cheeks. His remarks echoed with a poignant reminder of all that had unfolded and could never return. I gently folded the letter and placed it in a drawer alongside other cherished mementos from my journey. It formed an integral piece of my story. Now, one that I would always cherish, the home no longer felt devoid of warmth. The silence enveloped me, rich with memories, some haunting, others beautiful, as I turned my attention back to my painting. With renewed intention, I poured my feelings onto the canvas in ways I had never experienced before. Although the ache of what had occurred lingered, I found solace. As we navigated our individual journeys toward healing, time slipped by, each month unfolding in its own unique manner. As the sharp edges of the past began to soften, the memories lingered like faint shadows in the recesses of my mind, while the days grew shorter, marking the shift from fall to winter. I found myself retreating deeper into my craft. Painting became my therapy, allowing me to process everything that had transpired without uttering a word to anyone. My paintings evolved during this period, they grew increasingly abstract, filled with swirling colors and patterns that seemed to oscillate between chaos and order. Friends who visited my studio commented on the transformation, intrigued by the depth and emotion in my work. "Olivia, you've tapped into something," they said. "Deeply meaningful." One of them remarked, "It's as if you've found a new voice." They were right, yet I chose not to reveal how the events of those months had affected me. However, they also unveiled a strength within me that I hadn't recognized before: resilience and the capacity to feel profoundly, even amid sorrow. Karen called me frequently to share updates on Matthew's progress. One evening she remarked that he was improving. "He has been seeing a therapist and seems to have picked up writing once more, I believe. He is finally discovering his footing." "That's wonderful to hear," I replied, my tone steady despite the ache in my heart. She paused before proceeding. "I'm not certain what you said to him while he was with you, but whatever it was, it made a difference. He seems changed today. Stronger." I couldn't decide how to react to that situation. I found myself uncertain whether my actions had been beneficial or detrimental to him. That winter was particularly harsh, with snow blanketing the ground and ice etching patterns on the windows. The house seemed to radiate an unusual chill, leaving me uncertain whether it stemmed from the building itself or from my own lingering sense of emptiness. One especially cold morning, as I cradled a cup of tea by the fire, a parcel arrived in the mail. It came from Matthew. I carefully opened it, my hands trembling just a bit. Inside was a book, a first edition of The Great Gatsby, one of the classics we had discussed extensively during his visit. A message was tucked inside the front cover. "Olivia, I came across this and immediately thought of you. Thank you for everything. Your compassion, patience, and knowledge mean more to me than I can adequately express." As I took care of myself, I grasped the book and ran my fingertips over the weathered cover. This simple act filled me with tears. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of completion, a small yet crucial step towards healing. The days grew longer, and spring ushered in a sense of regeneration. The garden sprang back to life, with flowers blooming in brilliant hues that echoed the emotions I had captured in my paintings. I began to venture out more, engaging with friends and attending local art events. My work received a warm reception, and I even managed to sell a few pieces, a feat I hadn't accomplished in years. It was incredible to present my art to others and allow it to convey my thoughts and feelings in ways I couldn't articulate myself. One day, Karen made a call. While tending to the garden, I received some exciting news. "Matthew is releasing a new book." She shared her delight over the phone. "This summer marks the release, and he asserts it is his best work to date, which is truly fantastic." I replied, genuinely happy for him. "He wanted me to let you know." She explained that he said you were the one who assisted him in returning to writing. I couldn't decide how to react. A part of me experienced a surge of pride, while another was met with the familiar ache of grief. Summer brought a flurry of activities. Karen extended an invitation for me to join the city launch of Matthew's book, but I turned it down. I wasn't prepared to confront him just yet, particularly not in person. Instead, I opted to send him a short letter, but sincerely, Matthew, I am truly proud of you. Well done on the release of your new book. I have no doubt it will be as wonderful as you are. Take care of yourself, Olivia. I have sent it. Without expecting a reply, I was surprised a few weeks later when another delivery arrived. This time it was an autographed copy of his book. The inscription read, "To Olivia, for showing me the way back to myself." The words tightened around my throat, yet they also enveloped me in a soothing calm. Life continued its relentless march, and the memories of those months with Matthew lingered, no longer a weight but rather a woven thread in my narrative, a testament to the complexities of love, solitude, and the choices we make. I began to view the experience as a lesson rather than a misstep, compelling me to confront parts of myself I had long avoided. The depths of my loneliness, the yearning for connection, and the resilience I had yet to acknowledge. Though painful, this journey also brought unexpected healing. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills, I found myself reflecting on Matthew and pondering how he was faring. I pictured him at his desk, pen in hand, channeling his ideas onto the page with the same fervor and zeal he had always possessed. I wished for his approval, and for the first time in ages, I found myself genuinely appreciating that summer when the garden bloomed vibrantly, overflowing with colors and fragrances that appeared to honor the essence of life itself. As I wandered through the blossoms, a feeling of contentment washed over me, a sensation I had long been missing. Life unfolds in intricate layers, a tapestry woven with joy and sorrow, love and loss. Yet amidst this complexity, there lies undeniable beauty. I have come to embrace all that life offers, the good, the terrible, and everything in between. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the garden, a smile spread across my face, affirming that I was exactly where I was meant to be.